Hey there folks, Aldershot here, and today we're going to do an impression on Resident Evil, the HD Remaster Edition, available on Steam at the regular price of $20. It's developed by Capcom, of course, so let's take a look at what you'll be getting for that 20 bones. Let's take a look at the options. You have your display, either the original box ratio or the brand spanking new widescreen ratio. Obviously, we're going to pick the widescreen ratio. We did pay our $20 for something, right? And let's see here. We have our keyboard controls, and you can actually adjust each key manually if you like. But let's admit it, guys. This is a console port, and let me tell you, the classic Resident Evil games is not well suited for keyboard controls. I highly recommend some sort of gamepad. I am using the 360 wire controller myself, and it works quite well for this game. Now, if you are using the gamepad, do know you can't actually adjust each button manually. Rather, there is 4 different control schemes for you to choose from. I'm just using type A, which is fine with me. Now, over here is something that's kind of interesting. You have your original tank controls that the classic Resident Evil fans might remember, where up is always the direction that your character is facing. Not necessarily where the camera's facing, whereas alternate, or the more modern control scheme, is up is wherever the camera's facing and not necessarily where your character's facing. So that's kind of interesting. We'll definitely talk a little bit more about that when we get into the game. Now we also have vibrations and our defensive items. There is a defensive item mechanic, and you can choose either to trigger it yourself by hitting a button when necessary, or letting the computer trigger it for you when necessary. I got set on manual because I just like to do things myself. Alright, let's see here. Brightness isn't that important, it's just the screen here. You can adjust your monitor brightness if you want to. Then you have your audio settings, which is your standard issue sliders. You have multiple languages to choose from. Now, the video settings is kind of where PC players are going to find their meat and potatoes. You got your resolution options, Windows settings, vertical synchronization, which I don't know why that's on, that should be off. Refresh rates, frame rate, 60, variable or 30. We got set to 60. And we have multiple anti-aliasing as well. We got the highest on right now, FX8A3HQ, super fancy. We also have shadow quality and texture quality, and we got those set on high, of course. So it's not overly robust, to be completely honest, but at the same time, nothing too important is missing either. So there is that. So that's about it for the options. And let's take a look. Okay, we also have the manual as well. This being a console game, we all know it used to come with the paper manual, but these days they're all in PDF form, so it's there for you if you need to. Now, this is kind of interesting. This edition also gives us leaderboards, so let's take a look at that. So it's kind of cool because it kind of gives the player something to aim for, something that's new and something I definitely appreciate Capcom adding into the game. However, looking at this leaderboard, there's some pretty fishy things going on here, because I remember playing the GameCube edition, which that's what this version is, and I recall the fastest time hearing about it was about an hour and 15 minutes, let's say. Yet this guy here, this Wolverine fella, apparently finished this game with Chris with the hard difficulty in under 8 minutes. So I don't know what's up with that. It seems a little bit odd to me, but there you go. Either way, it's there for you. We also have gallery, where you can see your cutscenes and all that stuff that you have unlocked during the game, and that's pretty much it for the features and options of Resident Evil HD Remaster Edition. There's a couple of other things I want to show you before we actually get into the game. That's actually kind of neat. A couple of suggestions too, maybe. So, when you start the game, you have multiple difficulty settings to choose from. You have climbing like a mountain, which is basically hard, going on a hike, which is medium, or taking a walk, which is easy. Now, in my main campaign, I'm playing this under normal, and I'm a classic Resident Evil player. You know, I played all the Resident Evils before this, yada yada yada, And I find that under normal, I'm about halfway through this edition right now, is very, very easy. Like, I am stockpiled with ammo and health and everything. You have no idea. I'm a one-man tank right now. And again, I'm about halfway through this game under normal. So what I'm saying is, if you want more of the classic Resident Evil difficulty, the classic feel, I think it's pretty safe to recommend going right into the hard mode. That's if you're looking for that kind of experience, okay? So there is that. Now this is the part that I kind of want to show you. Now, you know, as you would remember, if you played the classic Resident Evils, you have both Jill and Chris's campaign to play through, and they're both, you know, they're both going to be going through mostly the same area. However, you might be going through them in different order. You might be doing puzzles in different order. And between the two characters, there are a few different areas that is new specifically to that character. And obviously, they'll have different narratives and they'll cross paths and all that stuff. But this is the cool part that I want to show you. You got different costumes for each character, which is kind of neato. And I do believe this is an exclusive feature just to this edition here. You have either the classic STARS uniform for either Chris or Jill, and then you have the BSAA uniform for either Chris or Jill. So that's kind of a neat little feature. Now in my game I'm just using classic because why not? In my next playthrough I'll probably play with the BSAA uniform just because I can. Alright, so we're going to get out of this and we're actually going to load into a pre-saved game. And the reason I'm doing this is because I believe Capcom's a little bit sensitive about showing cutscenes, and basically this is going to be the game right from the beginning minus all the initial cutscenes, right? Just so I don't get in trouble with YouTube and all that stuff. Alright, so here we are. This is Resident Evil HD Remaster Edition. So as you can see, it's pretty. It looks quite good. Now, if you haven't noticed already, the texture quality has been up-res, right? You can see that very clearly on the character model and in the environments as well. And the environment is pre-rendered, as in it's not true 3D. It's a 2D background that's imposed into the background as though it was 3D. And most of this stuff is like hand-painted stuff, right? And so they kind of up-res that, and they up-res the character, as you can see. I'll just see if I can get a nice close-up. There we go, right? So the texture quality and the model quality is actually quite sharp, especially for an older game, right? And they've done a pretty good job of that, I must say, for the most part. Now, there is going to be instances where you're going to find a couple of props, a couple of 3D models that will still have some stretched or blurry textures. So do keep that in mind. But for the most part, you know, the background elements, the character models, the pre-rendered backgrounds and all that kind of good stuff, all that is done very, very well as far as being up-res. So if you're looking for, you know, a higher quality experience of the Resident Evil 1 classic, then this might interest you just because it looks very, very sharp. It's quite pretty actually, and I have to say the pre-rendered backgrounds look beautiful remastered, and I like that. I actually kind of miss that kind of graphical style. Pre-rendered backgrounds is really not used all that often these days, but I really miss it because they're generally hand-painted and they show a high degree of artistry, and I really like that stuff, right? It looks real pretty. So for those who are uninitiated to the classic Resident Evil gameplay, let me run you down real quick, okay? You basically have to go through a bunch of hallways, do your best to manage your resources, because resources don't come easy in this game, generally speaking. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So item management is going to be a big deal. You're going to want to look for health and puzzle elements as well, like this arrow here. And you'll take these puzzle elements and you'll use them in different parts of the map, unlocking different areas. And you'll be doing that a whole bunch. It's a lot of going through hallway to hallway, room to room, unlocking door to door, and that's pretty much how you're going to be progressing through the game, all while managing your resources. And as I mentioned before, resources don't come cheap in this game, generally speaking, okay? And that's basically how Resident Evil 1 is going to play out, especially if you haven't played this game before. Now, do be warned that it doesn't play like the modern games. Now, modern games, it's mostly run down a corridor. Every now and then, you might see a fork in the road, so choose direction A or direction B. But in this game, you'll be backtracking a lot. You'll be going through the same corridor. You might even be going back and forth into the same rooms more than once. And because of that, the mansion and the level design is very, very puzzle-like. It's almost like a labyrinth. So you will have to use your memory muscles quite a bit. So you had trouble remembering things. This game might prove a little bit frustrating every now and then. Now, a little bit back to what I was saying about the graphics. As you can see, the base of the statue isn't as high res as the rest of the game. So this is an instance where you're going to see some blurriness. Some of the old texture quality still shines through, unfortunately. But as I mentioned before, it's mostly done very well. Like this door. Look how pretty this door is. That door texture has definitely been up-res, and I appreciate that. Now, anyways, back to what I was saying. So, there's going to be a fair amount of backtracking. And you might get lost in this game quite often because of the almost maze-like level design of this game. So do be aware of that, but that's also kind of one of the charms of Resident Evil, or at least the classic Resident Evils. For those who already played Resident Evil 1, you guys already know this. And I'm pretty sure that's why you guys are interested in this game in the first place. And the good news is that the classic gameplay is very, very much intact. Now, this isn't the PSX port, okay? This is actually the GameCube port. So for those who are looking for the PSX original experience, you're not really going to get that because the GameCube port is a little bit different. What they did with the GameCube edition was that they didn't actually just straight up made new models and textures and just ported the gameplay and the map design and all that stuff. They actually remixed Resident Evil a little bit, as in some of the puzzle orders are a little bit different. Some of the story bits are a little bit different even. So do keep that in mind. You're not going to be getting the original PSX edition. You are going to be getting the GameCube edition. Now, the good news is that the GameCube edition still feels very, very good. It still feels like it belongs to Resident Evil. I might even go as far as to say that the GameCube edition might be like what the developers originally had in mind, because, you know, developing for the PSX, you can only do so much. It only had so much memory, so much RAM, and all that stuff, and the GameCube edition definitely gave us a lot more content, right? So this remastered edition is basically the remastered of the better remastered edition, right? Remasterception. So there you go, guys. So if you're a classic Resident Evil fan, know that you'll be getting the classic Resident Evil experience, which is good, except up-resed and looking a lot prettier, which is not a bad thing. Looks like we are out of space. So this is what I mean by you need to manage your resources a little bit, because you only have 8 item slots, and if you can't actually drop items, which is a bit unfortunate. So you're gonna have to look for an item crate, and we haven't found one in this playthrough yet. So we'll keep looking, and we'll come back to this area and pick up that item. And this is also what I mean by you need good memory as well, because you gotta remember, oh yeah, there's an item there that you have to pick up. Now, the good thing about this game is it does let you know when, you know, there's still something that you need to do in that room. When it's highlighted in red in the map, that means there's still something there. There's either an item or a puzzle that needs to be solved. So it does give you some kind of indication, which helps the player out, which is good, of course, right? So what do I think of this edition overall? Well, I think something that you folks needs to know is that there is some technical hiccups as well. Every now and then when you load into a new area, there might be some frame drops. I don't really know why. And it happens kind of randomly. It doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen in the same area either. But it does happen every now and then. I definitely noticed that. Oh, we're going to avoid him because we can. We're going to save some bullets. So do be aware of that. But besides the frame loss on load, which again happens randomly and not always, the game runs pretty smoothly. It does run pretty consistent in frame rates. I haven't had any crashes. It's quite stable, and as I mentioned before, the upraising of the texture quality and the widescreen mode and all that stuff really does make this game look very, very pretty. It looks great, and I love the pre-rendered background. You know, that's definitely a nice touch as well. So there is that. Now there is actually something else that is new to this edition that I kind of want to go over. Ooh, right, this part. We're not ready for this part here. Alright, so for the people who played the original Resident Evil, you guys remember the tank controls, right? Let me turn that on. I actually am using the new controls. I know, right? Blasphemy. So we'll go back to the original, just like that. And we're going to go into a new area because this is kind of tight and claustrophobic, if you will. And this game definitely has a really, really great atmosphere, by the way. It definitely makes you feel very claustrophobic. It's very, very creepy, alright? So anyways, right now I am using the tank controls of the original classic Resident Evil. So up is always wherever my direction, where my character's facing, not necessarily where the camera's facing. And you have to hold a button to run, and in order to quickly turn back, I have to press down and X, otherwise I turn around really, really slowly, just like that, right? So this is the classic control scheme of Resident Evil. There is some advantages of this, though. Your straight will always be consistently straight, because it will always be the direction where your character's facing, and because the camera angle changes so much in this game, that actually helps quite a bit. However, there is another control scheme that I want to show you folks. Alternate, right here. Alright, save successful, good. Now, in alternate control scheme, this is basically more of the modern directional control that most people are used to in their games now. Where up and down is wherever the camera is facing, not necessarily where your character's facing, right? And it sounds great, but every now and then when you change directions, and because the camera angle changes so much, it does cause some movement jitters, and that can screw you up a little bit sometimes, kind of like that, where I wanted to run straight, but because I was holding down, that was the last direction that I was pushing, and the camera changed, it kind of pushed me backwards, right? But I have to be honest with you guys. I'm going to hate myself a little bit for saying this. At least the teenage side of me is going to hate myself a little bit for saying this. And maybe some of the classic Resident Evil fans may even hate me for saying this. But after getting used to the modern controls, I have to admit the game does feel more responsive. The game does feel speedier. And the trick to getting used to is basically to release the controls when the angle changes. And then just basically set it back to neutral, right? Once you get adjusted to that, the game actually does, again, feel a lot more responsive. So, you know, like I said, the classic Resident Evil fan in me hate myself a little bit for saying this, but it is the truth. It does feel a little bit better with the modern controls. So I do recommend using the alternative controls when you jump into this game. So there you go, folks. Now, if you haven't played the classic Resident Evil, this is a pretty good time to get into it because, well, you get the classic Resident Evil gameplay, as you can see. But you get all the fancy new doodads, you know, the nice graphics and all that stuff. And, you know, the classic Resident Evil, the visuals don't really hold up all that well, unfortunately, because old 3D just don't look that great, right? But I think this remastered edition, the nice thing about it is that I think it proves that this sort of gameplay does actually hold up and is actually still very, very enjoyable. because, you know, once the visuals was updated, the gameplay really shines through. So this is a great time to get into the classic Resident Evil if you haven't already. And for those who are looking for, you know, for those who have already played the classic Resident Evils and is looking for that kind of experience, then you should know that, you know, that experience hasn't been tainted. I do recommend playing this under hard difficulty right off the bat. And yeah, so there you go. That's basically how I feel about Resident Evil Remastered. Now do keep in mind, I loved the series, okay? I played the crap out of it right from the very beginning, and because of that, my opinion is going to be biased, so do keep that in mind. Take this impression with a grain of salt, with the knowledge that I do have that nostalgia bias behind it. But with that said, I still think this is a very good game. And for those who haven't played this, it's a great time to jump into the classic Resident Evils because of how pretty it looks. And for those who want the classic experience, here it is in its glorious HD form. So that's pretty much it, folks. If you enjoyed this, you know, let me know what you think of the game. Let me know if you played any Resident Evils in the past, and if you haven't, let me know what you think of the gameplays that you've seen so far. And if you haven't already, I would really appreciate if you subscribe. That would be really cool. That'd be super duper cool even. And that's about it, folks. So thanks for watching. Alder shoutouts.